And
Enough small talk. Let's get to it.
yes, let's get to the
Okay.
conversation. Yes. Okay. Good evening, everybody in India. Good morning if you're in the US or Canada. And good afternoon, good day, wherever else you're in the world. Thank you so very much for joining us for this live. And today I have with me somebody uber special, someone who's joining us from across the world. If you caught our small talk just a couple of moments ago, I have with me Kate Tavender, who is a leadership coach as well as an organizational effectiveness consultant. And Kate is somebody I met via LinkedIn, with whom I had a conversation, and in like few minutes into the conversation, we were jabbering away about our experiences and our thoughts and our beliefs, and it was so incredible. The synergies and the commonalities were so incredible that I knew I had to do a live conversation with her. So Kate has had a pretty long, deep, and rich leadership journey of almost 2 decades, and she right now works on some very interesting things. I'm not going to jump in and talk much about it because we are going to be talking about it in our topic, which is about faking it till you make it. And what is the cost that we women pay for faking it at work? So, Kate, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm really happy to be here. This is super exciting.
Absolutely.
Ah,
And I
we're
want to say,
giggly. We're kind of giggly because this is like for me. Yeah.
yeah, me too. Me too. Like, and I'm so excited to have you here. First of all, thank you so much for waking up so early and getting on this live. I don't know if I could do it, and I'm incredibly awed by the fact that you're here so early in the morning.
It's okay. It's a delight. Yeah, it's a great way to start the day.
Yeah. So I'm going to quickly ask you, Kate, to break the suspense and tell the listeners a little more about the work you do at present and why do you do what you do
Mhm.
right now?
Mhm. Well, so I have spent, as you mentioned, about 20 years in sort of the corporate world for the most part, and I after a couple of years of deep recognition that I needed to make a change, have moved into the space of consulting. And really, my focus now is all about helping other people, leaders, and professional folks with a significant focus on women,
Mm-hmm,
really clear obstacles and find more success in their career
mm-hmm,
and in their personal life, with a heavy focus on kind of building resiliency and supporting
mm-hmm,
ourselves in
mm-hmm,
how to handle stress and not
mm-hmm.
let that take us down. And that particular aspect of it is of high importance and passion to me because I was one of those people who didn't really do a very good job of insulating myself
Mm-hmm.
from burnout and stress and those kinds of things, and did
Okay.
have a significant bump along the
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
which I'm sort of through. For although it's a journey, life is always interesting and
Yes.
those kinds of things. But my
Yeah.
focus really is helping other people, you know, find greater success in whatever it is that they're focused on. And again,
Yeah.
I do my practice is largely around women and in who are in corporate or entrepreneurial roles,
Yeah.
helping them clear obstacles, find more success, and build resiliency along the way.
Yeah. I really like the fact that you point out that we don't really insulate ourselves, and you're not the only person there. We don't really even think of insulating ourselves when we get out into the world to work or whether it's to run our business. We just don't do it, and there is such a cost to it. And you realize this cost, I think, when when you have crossed your 20s and your 30s, and when you just kind of, in life and everything is catching up with you, that's when it really hits you that, oh my God, I'm so tired. I'm
Yeah.
exhausted. I'm burnt out. And I love the fact that you're talking about resilience. And we're going to go back to that a little further down in the conversation. But first, I'm really curious about your corporate journey because we have very
Hmm.
similar journeys.
Hmm.
And, we both spent about 2 decades in the corporate world. And I'm very curious to know what your leadership journey was like.
Yeah. Well, I've been very lucky.
Mhm.
I was one of those kinds of people, probably like a lot of folks on the call, who work really hard, It
Mm-hmm.
was really important to me. I have no trouble
Mm-hmm.
working myself, kind of a little bit too much maybe, but working really
Mm-hmm.
hard and being recognized
Mm-hmm.
and put forward. And
Yes.
that was a big part of my journey all the
Mm-hmm.
way through. So in that
Okay.
respect, I've been very lucky and
Mm-hmm.
met wonderful people along the way and learned so much about leadership. I have such a different perspective
Mm-hmm.
on it now. And
Mm-hmm.
why I loved it so much was because it really is about lifting other people up and not so
Mm.
much about putting yourself forward, but the really strong parts of leadership and the coaching aspect of leadership is kind of all that I do now.
Right.
Those parts really appeal to me.
Mm-hmm.
The part of the leadership journey and just my journey in general in the corporate world, and in kind of growing up, was that I didn't understand that there is this piece of holding yourself back and
Mm.
protecting some of yourself. I put it
Mm.
all on the line,
Yeah.
and and along the way was trying to mold myself to be a
Mm-hmm.
certain person that I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't. And that's the sort of faking it part, which I know we're going to get to.
Yeah.
And so what I did was, basically at the expense of myself, um,
Mm-hmm.
put all of me into my work, all of me into taking care of my family. So, like many women, it's not just about showing up at work every day. There's a whole other
Yes.
caretaking piece to so many
Yes.
women's lives, and that was my case. And
Yes.
when things actually started to go poorly,
Mm-hmm.
in parts of my life, particularly my family life, my children started to have
Mm-hmm.
significant challenges, which were requiring all of my attention. I
Mm-hmm.
just kept giving
Mm.
everything and
Mm.
simply had no. Um, I hate to say this word, but I didn't understand that I had to respect and love myself kind of
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
and that got in my way. And that
Yeah.
is where I, burned out, had
Mm-hmm.
mental health
Mm-hmm.
challenges that had been long
Mm-hmm.
ignored,
Yeah.
really bubble up to the surface
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
forced me to
Mm-hmm.
take stock and take a step back and
Mm-hmm.
figure out a way to include
Mm.
myself in the equation rather
Yeah.
than just pretend that that didn't matter. And I
Yeah.
and I have a bit of, it's hard to talk about because I don't love that that was my reality, and yet
Yeah.
because I say, especially now, this is so important and it seems
Yes.
so obvious,
Yeah.
but I think, um, women are really good at giving. They're not very good at receiving.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, somebody just commented, Suja Anthony, hello, thank you so much for joining us. But she said, it's the story of my life too. And isn't it so incredible that on two different countries, I said this once, and I'm sounding like a stuck record, but really look at the commonalities of our experience and the fact that we are all talking about one simple thing, that we pour ourselves into whatever it is that we do, whether it's a work or families or people we take care of, but we forget ourselves and
Yeah.
we don't create space for ourselves to exist. And I think this is, thank you so much for your vulnerability in sharing it, because I think this is a very important conversation for all of us to have. I can see that, there are people who are listening in. Please do weigh in. Please do share your
Yeah.
insights, because this is not really an interview. This is a conversation. This is a conversation for us women about our lived realities, and for us to really unpack the cliches like love yourself, accept yourself, and
Hmm.
say, what is our reality? Right?
Hmm.
So please join us. Please say hello. Please weigh in. Kate and I would love to hear it. And I'm going to keep flashing the comments that come in on the screen so Kate can see it too
Yeah.
and weave it
Wonderful.
into our conversation. So, Kate, thank you for that. Now, I mentioned to you, I think one of the first conversations we had, I mentioned to you, I said, okay, I worked in a very male centered workspace. And that
Hmm.
I felt like I was an island buffeted about in the
Hmm.
ocean, because there are so much of unspoken rules and regulations in a homogeneous landscape. And it just takes you so much time to really even understand what the rules are and how you should be playing those rules,
Hmm.
right? So, my question is, what was it like for you to be a woman leader? Because I understood in one of our conversations that you also worked in a similar sort of work landscape. What was it like for you to be a woman leader in a male-centered workspace? What demands did the landscape make upon you, and how did you respond to it? And I would really love to hear from you about that.
Yeah. So. Absolutely. That was my experience for much of my career.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I would say that I would say the thing that is, the most, so the men that I worked with
Mm-hmm.
were very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky in that respect.
Mm.
And there is a different way of coming to work when you are, in the places where I worked, where you are a man and you
Yes.
have probably a wife at home who does all of that, who doesn't
Yes.
work,
Yeah.
versus when you are a woman who is, in my case, married, two children, and then at some
Mm-hmm.
point two children who have some significant struggles, and
Yeah.
managing a team, and doing high level work, complex work in
Yeah.
an organization.
Yeah.
There's a different way of sort of existing, because
Yeah.
and I have a very supportive partner, and he carries his fair share. So I want to be clear about that. But
Absolutely.
especially because he's not far from here and he might hear this. But I think that there's a different way of showing up in the workplace, and
Mm-hmm.
there's this piece for me which was kind of having to always feel like I had to
Mm.
pretend that everything was totally okay and under control, even when
Mm.
balls were starting to fall. And
Mm.
that was the part that really takes its toll. Um,
Mm.
and because so many of the people that I was working with just wouldn't relate,
Yeah.
to sort of some of the things, or at least I would make the assumption that they wouldn't relate to kind of
Yeah.
my reality. And the
Mm.
other thing that I would say is that when you're in those kind of environments, there isn't a lot of other women that are
Yeah.
like you.
Yeah.
And certainly at the executive level, I wasn't an executive, but I was a senior manager, a senior
Yeah.
leader in
Yeah.
an organization. So I was relatively high up and was sort of one of those people
Yeah.
that was looked at to be, we want her to be going to the next level. At
Yeah.
which point I, sort of that was the end of my journey in
Yeah.
terms of corporate world, and moved into consulting. But
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of other women at the top who looked like me, who
Mm.
had, more than, couple of kids, family, etc. There was a couple, but there
Mm.
wasn't a lot. And so
Mm.
what that tells you is that this is impossible.
Yeah.
If you want to go all the way to the
Mm.
C-suite,
Mm.
then the sacrifices that you will need to make are so high that being able to juggle sort of both the family requirements and all of the requirements that work takes,
Mm.
just isn't something that's going to happen, because there's not very many people, or hardly any at all, that
Yeah.
look like me at the very top. um,
Absolutely.
and I would say and from my own experience, I wasn't able I wasn't able to continue to pretend when things started to become challenged and my mental health started to be a real problem and all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know I couldn't keep faking it. I couldn't keep
Yeah.
pretending.
Yeah.
And I tried for I was it
Yeah.
sort of took me 2 years to come to my own realization that this
Yeah.
wasn't working for me, and that it
Yeah.
wasn't worth it anymore to
Mm-hmm.
continue to sort of sacrifice myself to that extent,
Yeah.
and that I needed to take some time out to take care of my family. But then, hey,
Yeah.
how about taking care of me? And
Yeah.
that is a cliche, and it does sound silly, but it was very profound, and it required a significant sort of pivot in my life that I didn't see coming, and that was
Yeah.
hard to accept when it actually was when I was faced with it, because I was on a roll.
Yeah. No, I completely understand what you say. So just to kind of offer a bit of contrast, my experience was diametrically opposite. I was single when I was, in my leadership role, and there weren't any women, or there
Hmm.
was one other woman, and she had, she was married, and she had the family, the partner, the house, the car, the dog, everything. I was the person who looked different, and that was something that a lot of my male colleagues found very difficult to
Hmm.
really relate to, and it wasn't something I could often talk to with the sole other woman on the team.
Hmm.
So it's so interesting to see the contrast and that of our experiences, because I think regardless of whether you have a family or don't have a family, there is no right optic for a woman in the C-suite. It's always a struggle, but because we are so alone and scattered and isolated, we don't have these conversations that we need to be having. And again, when you mention about taking 2 years to really connect back with yourself, I took 2, 3 years to decompress from that whole scenario. I often liken it to going to space and coming back and decompressing just to get
Yeah.
it out of my system.
Yeah.
So this is a really interesting conversation we are having, and we are diving a little deep too. So I thank you for bringing the depth to this conversation with your honest sharing. I'm I know we've been talking about mental well-being, and I have noticed on LinkedIn and in our interactions that burnout and mental well-being are very, important areas of your work. And
Yeah.
I've got a little bit of a sense of why it is important. If you are comfortable sharing, I would love to know, why do you feel so strongly about helping people with burnout, or ensuring organizations are equipped to, not let people burn out, and to ensure that their mental well-being is taken care of.
Because if we don't have that, then we
Mm-hmm.
can't show up as good leaders, as good professionals. When that
Mm-hmm.
falls apart, um,
Mm-hmm.
we can't do our jobs. We can't do our jobs at work. We can't do our jobs at home. It
Mm-hmm.
just all kind of stops. And I think for me, there was this belief that
Mm.
I always had to be okay. I had to make it look really good. And that was the
Yeah.
part that, again, I don't know where that came from. I suspect it was how I was raised, and, all of
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of things and beliefs that,
Mm-hmm.
that women
Mm-hmm.
have,
Mm-hmm.
about being perfect and all of that nonsense. But
Mm-hmm.
there was, that for me took an enormous toll. And,
Yeah.
and, and so I really feel strong that people have to figure out a way to protect themselves, build resiliency skills,
Mm.
and take care of their mental health. And I don't do that. I'm not a psychologist, but
Yeah.
get having the right supports in your life, because if
Yeah.
you don't do that, then there's nothing left. And that's really,
Absolutely.
essentially kind of what happened to me. I have this story about sitting in a concert, watching Yo-Yo Ma. I don't
Oh,
know if you
okay.
know that
No.
name, but he is the world's most famous cellist. And I
Okay.
was in a concert. I was at that point on a stress leave, so I'd
Okay.
finally, like, it was just. I admit that openly, and I hope people hear that in
Yeah.
the right way. I'm not,
Yeah.
it was a point where I needed to take some time, and I was
Yeah.
completely confused about what to do about my career, because I
Yeah.
had nothing in my head about anything other than, like, I was in crisis.
Yeah.
Things weren't going well at home. There was all sorts
Mm-hmm.
of stuff going on, and I needed some time to
Mm-hmm.
figure things out. I'm in this
Mm-hmm.
concert. It's a beautiful, beautiful musician. This man, he's extraordinary, classical music, and I was watching him, and he is completely absorbed in what he's doing. He's playing
Mm-hmm.
the violin. His head is tilted back. He's got or the cello. I mean, his mouth is open. His eyes are closed. He's totally in flow. He's just
Mm-hmm.
so connected with what he's doing. And
Yeah.
I looked at him, and I'm sitting beside my dad. My mom had died recently, a little
Mm.
while before that. And so I was his date that night. And I started to just weep. And it was the most intense experience. And the reason was because I recognized that I had not experienced anything even remotely close to
Mm.
what was going on for this man on that stage.
Mm.
I was, like, so in awe that this person was having this connection with his passion. And here I was empty.
Yeah.
And, that was a real moment for me of recognizing what I was doing, how I was living, all of the things that I thought were really important were just
Mhm.
not me. And
Yeah.
something had to change.
Yeah.
And that was one of many. I have about four kind of 2 by 4 moments across the head where the universe sort of sends me a
Yeah.
message and says, you got to
Yeah.
do things differently,
Yeah.
where I really started a path of, um, kind of recognizing that giving everything, trying to be perfect was taking too much of a toll, and that I had to find a way to get more flow in my life, to find more passion, to
Mhm.
find more joy, to find more peace.
Mm.
And so, that was a whole journey unto itself, and of, quite a few years later has ended me in this position where, I want to help other people connect in with that, and
Yeah.
make sure that they're on a path of bringing themselves some peace and joy along the way of finding professional success.
Yeah. Kate, as of as an anxiety warrior myself, everything you say resonates so deeply with me because you have that moment in your that there's that pivoting, that moment of pivoting when you realize that, oh my God, my life is so empty. I have all the trappings, but I
What
don't have the
happened? How did
thing. Yeah,
I get here?
exactly.
Ah,
This was not what I had in mind for
no.
myself.
I'm better
Absolutely.
than this. I shouldn't be in this position.
And the most important thing was, it was for me, it was a moment of recognition saying, I deserve to be happy. I
Yeah,
deserve to thrive. I deserve to experience joy, not, in bits and spurts, but every day. I deserve to be happy every single day. And I wasn't. And, I'm just so grateful that I had that opportunity to pivot and get on the path that I am, because I recognize in you, the focal part of your work, like mine, comes from our living wisdom of having walked that path, having known the pitfalls, having known the pain and the struggles. Because it's only when it's only when you made your way through the darkness can you actually even help another person navigate that path themselves.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so I completely appreciate, respect, and applaud you for sharing this in such with such honesty and vulnerability. So quick, I'm just going to kind of deviate the conversation
Yeah.
into a lot of what we've been talking about, which is the fake it till you make it. Fake it till you make it has become such a mantra, and I think
Mhm.
when we were in corporate, it was like dinned into our heads: fake it till you make it, fake it till you become it, etc., etc., etc. But I don't think we ever had very deep conversations of what does it mean to fake it
Mhm. Mhm.
till you make it. How long do you fake it?
Mhm.
And in today's context, as a person running strategies, this is something that I keep telling people, that in an age when you're being called to be authentic, so you
Yeah.
can build genuine human connections, what is the relevance of fake it
Yeah.
till you make it in a woman's journey? What do you think? I'd love to hear from you.
Well, it's so great when you asked this question. I kind of was like, well, that's really interesting. So, because for me, there's a couple of different ways to interpret it, not
Mm-hmm.
all of which are necessarily bad.
Yeah.
So, there's a part of faking it, which certainly I think most of us,
Mm-hmm.
probably go through as we're trying to figure out who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So we go through all these different. Oh, I'm so glad somebody's really loving the conversation.
Yes,
I just saw the
Pallavi
chat. That's
Sabharwal
fabulous.
is there. Yeah.
I was just going to say there's this piece of it which is you're trying to figure out who you are. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that, as you're young, you're
Yes.
trying on different friend
Mm-hmm.
groups, you're maybe trying on different relationships, you're trying on different careers. I've had quite a
Mm-hmm.
few different career
Yeah.
pivots in my life as I'm trying to figure out all those things. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's, one aspect of it. There's
Mm-hmm.
also the aspect certainly in and I think in the corporate setting and in for careers where we fake it, which is sort of about
Mm-hmm.
screwing up your courage,
Yeah.
like step into places that are uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
in order and sort of put yourself out there and fake
Mm-hmm.
it because
Mm-hmm.
you may not believe that you have all of the capabilities or skills. And I actually kind of like that one,
Mm-hmm.
because as somebody who has got this sort of deep seated, or for much of my life, this deep seated belief that whatever I am isn't enough.
Yeah.
Um, this sort of sense of, well, no, step into that place of discomfort, you know, quell those ideas that I don't have enough capability or I don't have enough experience or, that
Mm-hmm.
imposter syndrome, put that away and step
Mm-hmm.
into it. And there can be an aspect of fake it till you make it in the sense of like, get over yourself,
Yeah.
just give it a go.
Yeah.
And I don't think that those are so necessarily bad or
Yeah.
harmful.
Yeah.
Where I think the challenge is when we are faking it in the sense of trying to be something that we are not and
Yeah.
trying to hide, the
Yeah.
parts of ourselves that we consider to be imperfect
Mm-hmm.
and not,
Mm-hmm.
I always say, like pretending that we don't have warts, whereas I really want people to show up warts and all, because
Mm-hmm.
I think that the warts are actually somebody else's beauty spots, if you will, and
Absolutely.
so, and certainly what I did was put on a facade of
Mm-hmm.
perfection, like thinking
Mm-hmm.
that I had to show up and look and be perfect,
Yeah.
even though I know that's impossible. That was
Mm-hmm.
the standard at which I was holding myself.
Mm.
And that kind of faking it, the faking it and pretending to be something that
Mm.
I wasn't, and really in my case to pretend to be okay when I was absolutely not okay,
Yeah.
is the part that really did a lot of damage, because the energy and the um, requirement, like to hold so tight onto this identity of perfection, this identity
Yeah.
of fitting in, and this identity of like, you know, everything's fine, everything's fine. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
took so much energy that
Yeah.
that I think in many respects that is what depleted me to the point where I just couldn't keep doing it anymore.
Yeah.
And I think so if that makes sense, there's these sort of different levels of faking it. And the part
Yeah.
that's the one that I worry about is when we are trying to be other than we are, because we
Yeah.
have this belief that what we are isn't good enough. And I hate
Absolutely.
that. I hate that for
Yeah.
people.
No, I agree 200%, because I did not realize how how challenging it was for me to live with myself in my head with this critic which was constantly telling me, no, you're goofing up, you're slipping up, keep it together, keep it together. I did not realize how it was manifesting in my body, how it was
Hmm.
manifesting in my head at a health level. And you have to walk that path to understand it, to
Yeah.
really experience it, to know, oh my God, that's not the way I'm meant to live. I'm
Yeah.
not meant to live that way, right? And I really love the way you have differentiated the different levels of faking it. And I agree with you that, if you are going through a situation, something new at work, something, a new
Yeah.
opportunity, it's very normal for us to be nervous, scared, afraid, all of that. And for me, what works is not to ignore those emotions, but to really create space for it and then fake it and then say, okay, you know what? I'm going to take a deep breath and do it any which way
Hmm.
and get better at it till it becomes, something that I am comfortable doing and becomes a part of my authentic self. That, it's a part of my expansion process,
Yeah.
not really me putting on a mask that doesn't fit me and then just doing my best to hold it onto my face and suffocate myself in the process. I think that's a brilliant way of, you've explained it really brilliantly for us. Just going to take a quick moment to say hi to Herman. Thank you so much for joining us. Herman's is an amazing person running photographer based in the Netherlands
Oh,
who does
wow.
some incredible lives himself. I see Pallavi Sabarwal also has joined in. Pallavi, thank you so much for sharing your insights and for weighing in. We've loved hearing from you, and everyone else, please keep sending your insights and ideas and thoughts in. Let's keep this conversation ball rolling. So, Kate, you now work with people in helping them to not burn out and to make sure that they're mentally resilient. So you also would get an opportunity to see the flip side of it, which
Hmm.
is the price people pay
Hmm.
for faking it. So what
Hmm.
do you observe as a coach, as a consultant and organizer? What is it that you observe? What is this price that people pay, and particularly women? What is the price that they pay for faking it?
Yeah, and I think that would be, some of the things we've already sort of touched on, but
Mm-hmm.
this, I think that often women stay way too long
Yeah.
in organizations, or in
Mm-hmm.
or in or in roles, or in places in their lives,
Mm-hmm.
trying so hard, that sense of sort of really resisting what is actually happening because you don't want to acknowledge it.
Yes.
And sometimes I can see it. And
Yes.
I
Mm-hmm.
people have to come to these realizations on their own. That's not the role of a coach to tell people what to do, but
Yes.
I sense so often that people are in pain. People are you
Mm-hmm.
know not living their true values, and
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
accepting who they really are, and being okay with that. And I mean, that really is
Yeah.
just, that is such a journey, and it
Yes.
takes its own time, so much time. And
Mm-hmm.
so many people, and women in particular, have this terrible, terrible um, voice, the inner critic that you've already talked about, that tells them really awful things. And so a big thing that I talk to people about is, one of the realizations that I had, which is pretty basic, and I know you would totally get this, Reka, because you're so enlightened. But for me, it was like, in my middle age, coming to realize that, actually those thoughts are not me. those are just that's a bunch of garbage, or a bunch of stuff that runs around in my head and tells me all these things that are not true, and that I actually have this opportunity to kind of distance myself from them, not only
Mhm.
question them and maybe pivot
Mhm.
away from them into a different direction, but also
Mhm.
just to acknowledge that, those thoughts are not who I am, and
Yeah.
that I can actually create some distance between who I am
Mhm.
and maybe kind of this maybe kind of wonderful person that I am. And this is sort of everybody, we are actually these sort of kind of our true selves. We think about I always talk about it as our inner rock star. Our inner rock
Yeah.
star is, if you kind of tap into that, that's a
Yeah.
powerful thing. Like our inner rock, who we really are when we are at our best. Gosh, isn't
Yeah.
that a wonderful thing? So maybe
Amazing.
that's who we really are. But those
Yeah.
thoughts, we can sort of have this opportunity to create a bit of safety and distance from them and push them over here.
Yeah.
And I talk a lot to folks about that, and it's pretty basic,
Mhm.
but it's pretty profound. And for me,
Mhm.
when I started to understand that those thoughts didn't necessarily have to be the truth. They could
Mhm.
just be, things that I say, oh, that's a
Mhm.
bunch of garbage, or, I don't need to believe that right now because it's
Mhm.
not true, or it's just
Mhm.
passing and it's going to
Yeah.
float like a cloud.
Yeah.
That started to open up for me this concept
Mhm.
of, oh, there's something more here. I'm
Yeah.
bigger than that.
Yeah.
And certainly I talk a lot to folks about this, and as a
Mhm.
mom with anxious children,
Mhm.
this is something they're very comfortable with now because they hear me talking about this all the time. We're like, oh, those are just your thoughts. That's just
Yeah.
you, tell those thoughts to stick it where the sun don't shine, that kind of thing.
Kate, it's really interesting. What I picked up and what stuck in my head is the fact that we need to insulate ourselves
Yeah.
from our own limiting thoughts.
Ourselves.
Yeah, from that, because there's so much of
Yeah.
inherited
Yeah.
conversations that are running, scripts that are running in our head, which are really detrimental to us, and it doesn't let us see our inner rock star, as you call it. And
Yeah.
I think that's a very profound observation. What other nuggets of wisdom have you gleaned from your journey and would like to share with us?
Oh boy. Well, I think the other thing that a lot of people do, is enter the and so I'll just share that one of the ways that I connect with people is I share a lot about my own journey,
Yeah.
and I do a lot of speaking and things like that, and that is always what people seem to connect with.
Yes.
Certainly the tips and the tools and all of those kinds of things, but it's
Mhm.
the fact that, oh, you went through that too.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so this is another one that I connect with, and that I connected with when I recognized it, and that other people, I think, recognize in themselves when I share this story. But this
Mhm.
idea of, we aren't here actually to suffer. So
Yeah.
kind of like my Yo-Yo Ma story, like watching this
Yeah.
man, connecting with his instrument, playing this. Anybody who doesn't know Yo-Yo Ma, look him up on YouTube. He's this extraordinary musician. Watching him play, and seeing the passion and we all want that for ourselves, but so
Yes.
many of us sort of along the way end up in a place where we're like, wow, this is not my life. This is not what I wanted for myself. And
Yeah.
and I think that for a lot of folks, we drill into ourselves, and I find this more with women. Women
Yeah.
are so hard on themselves. Men, it's more when I coach a lot of men leaders, it's more about how do you think, expand your leadership and be coaching and being more supportive. Women, it's more they just don't leave anything for themselves. And
Yeah.
it's this piece around, and that's a stereotype, I recognize, but I do notice that. But for so many women, it's this thing that where this belief where I need to suffer, it needs to be painful, it needs to be hard, and instead
Mhm.
sort of acknowledging that
Mhm.
perhaps there is a way to be in this world and actually be allowed to give yourself permission
Yeah.
to find joy, give
Yeah.
yourself permission to find some space and some
Yeah.
ease. And that was
Yeah.
something that was for me like, ease, what do you mean ease? It has to be hard. I'm not working
Yeah.
hard enough if it's easy, or
Yeah.
I'm not pushing enough
Yeah. Yeah.
if I'm not allowed to take space, I'm not allowed to take care of myself. And it wasn't like anybody was saying this to me, this is what I was saying to myself.
Yeah.
And I think that is super, super harmful. And I see so many women leaders,
Yeah.
particularly, who are, it's always about, I'm so concerned about my team. And, it's sort of like, what about you? What
Hmm.
about you? How, and is it possible that taking care of yourself and putting yourself first and putting your sort of own oxygen mask on first will
Hmm.
actually support the team and the people in your life even
Hmm.
better?
Hmm.
They will benefit if you are stronger and you have more space,
Hmm.
rather than giving 100, everything. So there's nothing left in the tank.
Yeah, it's, to use another cliche, it's about putting the oxygen mask on yourself first,
Yeah.
because you really cannot pour from an empty glass. And I have a very interesting comment from Herman that I'm going to put up there, Kate, for you to read.
Just to become and manifest. So it says, hi, ladies, this is a very interesting topic. For us to become and manifest who we want to be, we've been told that we must start putting ourselves in that person's shoes to imagine that we are already living in that person's lifestyle already. I hope I'm making sense here. Do you think this is faking it? What are your thoughts on this? So we must start putting ourselves in that other person's shoes. Yeah, that's interesting. So it's kind of like you're saying that we have to imagine being like somebody else. I think that's about empathy somehow. I don't know if that's what you were getting at, Herman. So I do think there's a lot of, um, uh, I think we're all better when we think about others,
Okay.
and when we think, yes, what were you going to say,
It can,
Reka?
what, Herman, what comes to my mind for this
Yeah,
conversation? That's a really interesting question. Thank you
yeah.
so much, because I think we live in a day when everyone's talking about manifesting. And I
Oh,
think
oh,
this is
yes.
a fabulous question for me. And this is my personal experience in this whole manifestation thing. It is, firstly, if you don't know who you are and you're not comfortable in your skin, you can never walk in another person's shoes. You can't.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's the truth of it. That's what I have experienced. The second thing I've noticed is, it's not just enough to walk, you have to feel it. So if I can walk, then I can run. But if I'm just sitting and I'm not even crawling, and I say I'm going to run, there's no way I'm going to get to it. So I have to be really okay in my skin. I have to be good there, and then want to be in a better place. That's my interpretation of it, and I don't know if that makes sense to you now. I don't think it's faking it. If you're already in a good space, you're owning your skin, you're comfortable in it, you're finding joy in your skin, you're already feeling abundant, and then you want to, expand your circle of abundance and your ability to manifest abundance, because that's life. That's what life is all about. We are wired as energy beings to do that. But if you haven't accepted yourself, and if you're telling yourself that you're not enough, you're not good, you're not this, you're not that, I don't think you can manifest anything, because you're in a space of, absolute abject poverty of the spirit and scarcity. So
Mm-hmm.
that's just my two bit on it. Kate, what do you
Yeah.
think? You want to weigh in there?
Well, I was just thinking of the part about walking in the shoes of others,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
and for me, I would, echo what you're talking about, in the sense of, if you don't have enough of a connection with yourself, and enough of, a sense of who you are, and that uh,
Hmm.
protection of yourself,
Hmm.
and all of those kinds of pieces, you can't possibly walk in anybody else's shoes. You
Yeah.
need to be strong in and of yourself to help others. You're a better leader. And this is the part I didn't get. It was like, oh no, I have to be giving to everybody else and making sure everybody else is okay. That's the most important thing. And forgetting
Hmm.
that, actually, making sure that I am part of the equation,
Yeah.
that's just as important, and maybe
Yeah.
even more important. It's
Yeah. Yeah, Herman's just added in to say it's not so much about the
Yeah.
empathy here. We must feel the energy of who we want to be in order to move to ourselves towards the goals. And
Yes.
we must set an intention here. I agree 200% with you on that, Herman.
Yeah.
So thank you for weighing in and adding this new dimension. I don't think Kate and I even thought about this when we
No.
started this live.
No,
So we
no.
are very grateful that you have added this dimension into the
But I
conversation.
love the word intention, and that's
Yeah,
something that I use a lot,
yeah,
and deliberate,
yeah.
because I think that some of the things, at least, certainly in the Western world, people aren't very, very connected often with this idea of separating my own identity from the nasty thoughts that go on in my head. We're
Mm-hmm.
getting better with this as, things like mindfulness come to the fore and get more talked about in the workplace,
Yes.
and
Yes.
resiliency and those kinds of things. But I think, setting intentions for ourselves and being deliberate about
Mm-hmm.
making space are the kinds of things that start to allow us to build resiliency and allow us to sort of take back some sort of power over changing the way we live our lives. And for me, I'd never had intentions around this, and I was never deliberate
Mm-hmm.
about making space for myself. And that's something that I talk a lot to people, is kind of like, nobody else is going to do this for you, even your
Yeah.
workplace. And I know a lot of
Yeah.
people have this idea that, and I do believe that
Yeah.
workplaces can support people in building resiliency, but ultimately it's a self practice. Ultimately,
Yeah.
we need to take accountability and have the right people in our lives that support us along the way. But that
Yeah.
we need to take accountability to build that in.
Yeah.
And in this crazy, busy pandemic, world, taking that space, that daily deliberate setting an intention where we sort of do these kinds of practices, whatever they are, if it's
Mm.
meditation or if it's yoga or whatever it needs to be, gratitude, um, making some space for that is critical. And that in and of itself is this sort of commitment to discipline, which is hard, really hard. But that is, to me, where we have this window of opportunity.
Thank you so much for talking about creating space because, in the past few lives that I've had, this has been a topic of conversation with all my guests. Everyone talks about creating space. And it seems that this is the primary need for many of us,
Yeah.
that we have to create space for ourselves. So, to quickly wrap up now, Kate, I want you to share three of your golden tips for women leaders, so that they can create this create the space for themselves, they can hold space for themselves, or even if it is just to navigate their way through unfamiliar landscapes without letting themselves down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm looking at my notes because I wrote a few of these down, and I want to make sure they're still the ones that I. So yeah. So I think the first one absolutely is that I encourage people to challenge any of the thoughts that tell you you're not enough.
Hmm. Okay.
And that one really sticks out to me as being sort of this fundamental undercurrent for so many people. This
Hmm.
tape that plays in our head that, bottom line tells us that we aren't good enough. Who we are is
Yeah.
somehow lacking.
Yeah.
And that I really encourage folks to challenge that. And that leads to the second one, which is put yourself out there, warts and all. And this really speaks to sort of inclusive workplaces and all of those things, because those warts, like the things that make you, that you think are your imperfections, are exactly
Hmm.
what the team needs, or
Yeah.
exactly what your organization needs. And
Mm.
if they don't, well, then maybe it's not the right place.
Yeah.
Or if you feel, or if that's somehow you're being sort of, you're in a place where you're sort of feeling like you can't show up in all of that. Like,
Yeah.
are you sure you can't? Like,
Yeah.
what would be the worst thing that could happen if you really showed up as your true self?
Yeah.
And because ultimately, if you're holding back, that's going to come and,
Yeah.
and rear its head in some way, and you may need to rethink how you're doing things, which is a big question. So my a big challenge. So my suggestion is really, like, let it all out, warts and
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And I think the next the sort of last one is, push yourself out of your comfort zone. So
Yeah.
fake it. Except I
Hmm.
don't know if we should use that word, because we get all
Yeah.
confused about what we mean. So
Yes.
it maybe is,
Yeah.
but bring some self-compassion with you. You
Yes.
know, so I always want to encourage people, women in particular, always think they don't have enough capabilities. So there's that funny story about, if a man looks at a resume, and he sort of looks at the top line
Yeah.
job,
Yeah. Yeah.
and is like, yeah, I can do that, no problem. And a woman looks at the resume and she goes down the list meticulously on every single qualification and says, oh, I can't apply for it if I'm missing one.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing I'm talking about, is push yourself, because
Yeah.
likely you do have what it takes. And
Yes.
even if you don't, you're going to learn along the way. But bring
Yeah.
your self-compassion with you. It's not about perfection. It's about just doing the absolute best you can and then forgetting the rest. And that's
Yeah.
another tip that I share with people, which is, put yourself all out there, do the best you can, whatever that is
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
But doing your best also includes your own best interests, keeping
Yes.
yourself in the equation. And then,
Absolutely.
once you've done your best, that's kind of all you can do, right? If you can honestly
Yeah.
put your hand in your heart and say, I gave it my all today,
Yeah.
then you can go to bed hopefully with a lighter spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. Herman, as my opinion of faking it will be posting pictures of us photographed in front of private jets limousine, which is only misleading to our clients who see our posts.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's an
Well,
interesting,
well, the world
you
of
know,
social media really is.
yep,
I mean,
yep, yep,
that's another great tip for folks is not
yes.
not to spend too much time absorbing all of that, because remember, people are cultivating the very best image of their lives, and that can make us feel like we're not measuring up somehow if our lives don't look as shiny as that.
And that's also interesting. Herman's comment reminds me because that's something we talk about so much in the business of personal branding about being real and being authentic. People will find out. We don't realize it, but people know. We think we've got it all together, but people always know, and there's always a way for them to know. And if you're faking it with status symbols that are borrowed and trying to create this image that is not you, it's only a matter of time before the truth comes out, and that's going to be a bigger problem for you.
And
So,
I would just add to that really quickly to say that, don't you just love the people that are real more
yeah,
anyway?
absolutely.
And I think that's something with age. I have filtered a lot of my life at this
Mhm.
point to not,
Okay.
I don't want to engage as much with the folks that are so interested in making it look all shiny and perfect. I actually prefer the kind of
Yeah,
the folks that are showing the underbelly a little more.
we love the flossom, don't we, Kate? And on that note, we are going to sign off for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you for weighing in with your comments. Thank you for, just sharing your wisdom with us because it's really enhanced the depth of our conversation. I will be back next Friday at 6:30 p.m. India time, and we will be talking about how can women craft their hero stories with another surprise guest from Europe. I'm not going to tell you who the person is. You will have to wait and find out. But till then, have a great weekend.